I stood there, observing the spectacle unfold. The elegant restaurant, the clinking wine glasses, hushed laughter, and her seated with him, laughing, while I gripped the divorce papers tightly in my hand. My pulse raced, but my countenance remained impassive, for I knew all too well. Each lie, every hollow justification, every furtive glance she cast me, hidden beneath a mask of false smiles. The terrible truth had already surfaced, and I decided to bring it to an end in the most precise manner possible. She was oblivious to my presence. Yet I remained unaware that I had already pieced together the puzzle. Her lover, the man she swore was her future, was so ensnared in his web of seduction that he barely noticed his surroundings. As I drew nearer, I felt the shockwave that struck her as soon as she laid eyes on me. Her face drained of color, her lips quivered, but still she tried to preserve her composure. It was then that I placed the letter before her, nestled between her wine glass and plate. She gazed at the envelope as if it were a time bomb ready to detonate. In essence, it was. A wave of shock washed over his face, yet what followed was unforeseen. Tears spilled forth, their source unclear whether they stemmed from remorse or utter despair. She attempted to speak. He endeavored to defend the deceit with words that rang hollow as they left his lips. "It's not what you think," she whispered, her voice cracking, but I didn't require more explanation. I was already aware of the situation. I had tracked her every step, remained hidden while she betrayed me repeatedly. I could have confronted him earlier, but I chose the opportune moment. Now, the lover stood by, oblivious to the magnitude of the unfolding events. I had been preparing for this moment for each tear, for every plea. However, what she did not realize was that her betrayal was not the gravest part of this tale. The man she chose, the lover, was not merely an adventurer. He was a con artist, a fraudster. Believing she'd found her soulmate, she was instead a means for his financial gain. Her affection did not mirror mine, and soon I'd uncover the cost of my mistake. The weeks leading to that dinner were tormenting for me, as I feigned innocence and trust in her lame alibis work overtime, trips with friends, supposed encounters with colleagues. Convinced she had the situation under control, she was oblivious to my strategic moves. Every excuse she made only strengthened my case, as I gathered proof and planned for the moment when she'd be completely ensnared. That moment had arrived. As I placed the divorce papers on the table, the lover looked at me uneasily. Perhaps he sensed his scheme was about to unravel, or maybe he was simply too cowardly to confront the repercussions. Either way, that was our last encounter. And her? She had no inkling of what lay ahead. "Look at this," I stated calmly, indicating the envelope. Her eyes filled with tears as she attempted to preserve what remnants of her dignity remained, but her hands trembled as she unfolded the document. The rapidity of her breathing increased as she read the words that would mark the demise of our union. Yet it wasn't the divorce that truly shattered her. I continued, "Your future with him." I indicated the man who now seemed insignificant in the chair. "The man you believe will offer you a new life. He's already on the run. You think he adores you, but all he desired was your wealth." Her eyes fluttered, perplexed. "For weeks, I trailed you. I'm aware of every penny you transferred to him, every investment you made. He swindled you just as you deceived me." The repercussions of these statements were instantaneous. The lover, previously quiet, started to shift uneasily. I smirked slightly, observing his efforts to manage the situation. He wasn't anticipating this. She didn't deceive me for a non-existent dream, but she did, trapping herself in a network of falsehoods she helped construct. The irony lay in that, when she required him, he would desert her without a second glance. "He'll leave you," I said, continuing. "When that happens, there will be nothing left, not me, not our children, not the wealth you thought was yours." Finally, her tears cascaded. Maybe they were tears of regret. Yet it was too late for such feelings. I walked towards the door as she pleaded and called for one final chance. But her time had run out. The game was over. All that remained was to observe the collapse of the house of cards she built. For the first time in a long while, I felt liberated. After that night, the lover departed as predicted. She, on the other hand, faced the repercussions. What remains of the woman I once adored? After a momentous dinner, here is the revelation she made, a shocking truth you should be privy to. Welcome. Our channel promotes a message against deceit. All our stories are works of fiction, serving as cautionary tales on how treachery can irreparably ruin lives and relationships. The lesson behind every tale is crystal clear: betrayers always suffer the consequences. Brace yourselves, for what follows is an enthralling narrative filled with unexpected twists. Buckle up and let's dive into the story. John bore the burden of responsibility since marrying Sarah. From the start, he was aware that sharing a life would necessitate sacrifices, and he was prepared to confront each one head-on. Sarah was the kind of woman who enchanted everyone around her. With her long brown hair and a smile that brightened any space, she appeared as an incarnation of happiness. She was loving, attentive, and her upbeat demeanor contrasted with John's more reserved and practical disposition. Together, they fit seamlessly, appearing almost flawless, and this sufficed for quite some time. To an outsider, their lives seemed idyllic. They resided in a picturesque neighborhood filled with companionship and a tightly bound community. John, recognized as a distinguished lawyer, invested countless hours at his job, championing principles he deemed righteous. His towering presence in the city center office, marked by steadfast determination and unyielding morals, set him apart. In contrast, Sarah, with an ardor for the arts, found contentment in small joys like unfinished artworks or teaching sessions with her students or organizing exhibits showcasing upcoming artists within their city. They were blessed with two young children, whose smiles and tender gestures momentarily eased John's burdens from work and the complexities of adulthood. The family's daily life was stable, characterized by shared dinners and reminiscing about past events, with children constantly laughing and playing near the table. John, feeling proud of his role, felt a sense of responsibility in safeguarding the small world they had meticulously constructed. However, similar to many marriages that endure for more than a decade, John discerned a shift between himself and Sarah. There were no significant arguments or heated disagreements. Instead, it was something more elusive, as if an unseen barrier had started to develop between them. John noticed that conversations were no longer as fluid as they once were. Things that used to feel effortless now felt burdensome, almost stifling. Sarah, who previously shared everything openly with him, now appeared distant, keeping her thoughts to herself, no longer discussing them with the same enthusiasm. Initially, John chose to overlook these indications. Sarah was occupied, as was he. John and Sarah, with their demanding lives and children, found themselves caught up in monotonous days with little room for expressions of affection. Beneath the surface, however, both sensed a shift that left them uneasy. While John was indistinct about what was changing, Sarah, a natural dreamer, felt suffocated by the routine that had once felt comfortable. She continued to love John, but found herself longing for more. Something deep within her yearned for novel experiences. Her teaching job, which she previously found fulfilling, no longer held the same luster. The days blurred together, and at night, her mind drifted further away, questioning things she'd once taken for granted. Occasionally, she missed her pre-married self, the freedom to traverse the world unbound by obligations. They didn't openly discuss their feelings. A divide existed between them, as if they both sensed an underlying unease, but lacked the resolve to tackle it head-on. For John, bringing up the matter would feel equivalent to acknowledging a breach in something he had pledged to safeguard: their marriage, their family, the harmonious life they had constructed. For Sarah, confessing her dissatisfaction meant confronting emotions she wasn't entirely clear about, not even understanding them herself. Over the past few months, issues have become more apparent. Sarah has been spending more time away from home, consistently providing rationalizations. "It's just an art event," she asserted. "The students need me." John found her explanations convincing, or at least attempted to. It was simpler to accept these reasons rather than challenge them. Moreover, he had always trusted Sarah. She had never provided him with a reason to doubt. Yet, this unwavering trust was starting to show signs of strain, much like a rope gradually fraying at its ends. In their home, their bond grew more robotic, confined to trivial discussions, school matters, bills, upcoming social dinners. Sarah, usually so emotionally invested, gradually distanced herself day by day. When John gazed into her eyes, he sensed a stranger, an aspect of her unfamiliar. In hushed solitude, during his nocturnal office hours, John permitted doubts to surface. Was there truly an issue? Had he been misconstruing Sarah's detachment, or was it simply the accumulated stress of time and duties taking its toll? These worries kept him awake for long hours, yet the next day he donned the facade of a perfect spouse, striving to maintain the illusion that all was well. Sarah, conversely, wrestled with conflicting feelings. A part of her yearned for the life she had with John, the children, the security, the admiration for him. However, a deeper, unsettled part within Sarah longed for change, something vague and indistinct. She sought guidance from friends, some liberal, others conservative, yet none of their advice seemed to alleviate the void she experienced. The city, where they had resided for numerous years, no longer held its previous allure for Sarah. Each street, cafe, and park reminded her of a time when everything was seemingly flawless, yet now left her feeling imprisoned in a life she had unknowingly outgrown. She did not wish to cause John pain, that much was clear. He was a good man, and their children were her greatest treasures. Yet, the sensation of suffocation, of something being amiss, grew harder to suppress. The days drifted on, with John attempting to rekindle his bond with Sarah through small gestures. He proposed more outings together, planned family excursions, organized surprises for her. Despite her best attempts, Sarah found herself unable to fully commit to her endeavor, a burden of guilt growing heavier on her shoulders. Simultaneously, an unsettling sensation lingered within her, a longing for something that had been dormant for far too long. On this specific evening, John was due home from work later than usual. A pressing issue at the office had required his attention, and the shadows crept in as he stepped inside their home. The house was dimly lit and eerily quiet. Occasionally, Sarah would be out with friends or attending professional functions, but this silence weighed on John more heavily than ever before. He glanced at his phone, no notifications, no missed calls. Scaling the stairs to their bedroom, John couldn't shake the thought that had been gnawing at him for weeks. A shift was underway, a change was imminent. Though he remained unsure of what exactly it entailed, the sense that his familiar life teetered on the brink became increasingly difficult to ignore. Daily, the distance between John and Sarah escalated noticeably. The warmth once displayed by her gestures waned, revealing more and more emptiness. John observed these changes, despite his attempts to uphold domestic tranquility. Nights that echoed with silence, excuses for isolation, and absent stares from Sarah during his conversations all contributed to an unspoken barrier emerging between them. He concealed his disquiet, but a tempest was brewing within him. John sensed something profoundly amiss. The reasons for Sarah's protracted absences became ambiguous. A perpetual event, an inescapable obligation, a fresh pretext cropped up each time, sounding increasingly detached from reality. He wished to trust her, needed to believe her. However, the instinct honed over his years as a lawyer cautioned him that the truth lay hidden where he had yet to uncover it. As days drifted by, John's thoughts churned relentlessly. John closely examined her actions and scrutinized her spoken words. Sarah appeared more detached than ever. When they were gathered as a family, she seemed misplaced, almost like she was living another life, far off. John attempted to engage in family rituals and pastimes, but felt as if he was waging a battle against an unseen force, something he hadn't yet defined. It was on a rainy afternoon, upon John's return from work, that he received the first clear proof that things were amiss. Navigating a street near the center, he observed Sarah entering a cafe with a man unfamiliar to him. Initially, it didn't seem suspicious. It could be a work meeting or a casual encounter. However, their behavior displayed an intimacy that disturbed him profoundly. The way she touched his arm filled with mirth. There was something there he couldn't overlook. John parked the car on the opposite side of the street, feeling his heart race. For months, a lingering doubt had been eating away at him, soon to be validated. He stood there, distant yet intense, with a cocktail of pain and disbelief surging within him. How could Sarah, the vow-bound woman he cherished, betray him in such a way? The mother of his children, they'd built a life together, a family. The thought of it all crumbling before his eyes, her being with someone else, was almost unbearable. Their conversation at the cafe stretched longer than John desired, filled with laughter, glances shared. There was no denying now what was transpiring. Sarah was having an affair. The truth, raw and merciless, hit him hard. He felt as if his chest was being ravaged from within, but he didn't retaliate, not yet. Instead, he stepped aside, filed the information, and started strategizing his subsequent moves. The treachery, though hidden for now, pulsed in his mind, aching like an unhealed wound. Afterward, John scrutinized Sarah's activities more carefully. So far, he hadn't confronted her openly. I knew solid evidence was essential before taking any action. He started conducting covert investigations instead. He queried shared acquaintances, scrutinized their online interactions, and examined their bank records for dubious transactions. It didn't take long to uncover what he sought. Texts from her phone, appointments set at hours she claimed to be working, costly presents unknown to him. The jigsaw puzzle started to come together, exposing a truth John had long dreaded but never admitted. Each new revelation hardened his heart, replacing the initial pain with coldness. He sensed the climax was approaching and began planning his retaliation. If Sarah intended to shatter their shared endeavors, he vowed to make her pay. John saw no more space for negotiation or reconciliation. Inside him, something shattered irrevocably due to the betrayal. During those days, Sarah persisted in acting as if nothing was amiss. She would still beam at her children, feign normalcy in life, but John understood the deception. Every move of hers left a sour taste of irony in him. How could she so effortlessly live this lie? How could she look him straight in the eye and keep up this facade? Though John was teetering on the brink of collapse within, he maintained an outward calm. I sensed the need to bide my time for the opportune moment. It was a Saturday night when it all came to light. Sarah had said she was attending a reunion with pals, which was usual for weekend evenings. John, however, already knew the reality. He had engaged a private investigator to track her, and that evening he received images that validated his suspicions. Sarah was not with friends. She was with him, the man from the cafe, sharing a night that should have been theirs. John experienced a blend of fury and hurt upon viewing the pictures, confirming his suspicions for weeks. The reality of Sarah's infidelity became tangible and indisputable. The man she was with, enjoying glances and laughter with her, was the culprit tearing apart their union. For hours, John remained speechless, gazing at the images as if time stood still. The night had taken a decisive turn, and there was no going back. His affection for Sarah, the once solid foundation of trust in their relationship, had been completely eroded. He knew that nothing would ever be the same again. That night held a significant change. The burden of his decision weighed heavily upon him, yet he also felt an unexpected sense of liberation from finally breaking free from the cycle. Dinner was set for later. Every detail had been meticulously planned to reveal the truth in a damaging manner. Sarah remained oblivious to the impending events. In his cocoon of deceit, he assumed he could carry on with his duplicitous existence unscathed. As John donned his suit, he observed the fatigue in his mirror gaze, a testament to weeks of sleepless nights and vigilant silence. He couldn't pinpoint when he morphed into that man, when his affection for Sarah transformed into something so icy. There was no more fury. Instead, there was determination to unveil the truth, to close this chapter of his life with decorum. He yearned for justice, not vengeance. At least, that's what he strived to persuade himself. Meanwhile, Sarah remained serene. To her, that night signified another encounter with Peter, the man she had covertly dubbed her future. Over the past few months, she allowed herself to be swept away by a delusion. She thought that with Peter, she would finally experience the exhilarating life she longed for. He was charismatic, attentive, and seemed utterly captivated by her. John's usual security was not what Sarah sought. In Peter, she found an escape, a chance to rebegin, distancing herself from the monotony of marriage. Upon reaching the restaurant, John detected the aroma of refined cuisine mingled with the gentle hum of background music. The sophisticated ambience teemed with couples whispering covertly, engrossed in their own worlds. Yet, John's attention was singularly focused on one objective: Sarah and Peter. He knew precisely where they were seated. He had spotted their names on the reservation list, which confirmed his suspicion that this night would mark the end of the charade. With determined strides, he navigated through the restaurant without pause. Upon spotting them, a subtle knot tightened in his stomach. There they were, enjoying themselves carelessly. Sarah appeared stunning in the blue dress John had gifted her for their anniversary. Ironically, it was as if she was infidelitous with the very memory of what they once shared. He observed for a brief moment before moving closer. "Evening," said John, subtly smiling as he positioned the divorce document on the table, next to wine glasses. Sarah's gaze instantaneously stiffened. Her eyes expanded when she saw him there, giving the impression that the floor had vanished beneath her feet. Peter, conversely, attempted to mask his discomfort, but could not conceal his bewilderment. John remained steadfast, displaying no hint of distress. "What? What are you doing here?" Sarah asked, her voice quivering. "Closing the chapter we initiated, Sarah," John answered calmly. "Read the contents." The ensuing quiet was heavy, almost oppressive. Sarah, with trembling hands, retrieved the white envelope and read its contents. As her eyes scanned the words, her facial expression transformed from shock to dejection. Tears started forming in her eyes, but they were not the tears of remorse. Instead, they mirrored a realization that it was all at an end. "No, it doesn't need to be this way," he attempted to reason, but his voice lacked strength. "It does, Sarah," John countered firmly. "You've chosen your path. Now you must face the repercussions." Initially quiet, Peter stepped in. "I believe this matter should be resolved privately between the two of you," he suggested, rising from his seat. However, John barred him before he could move further. "Remain here," John commanded sternly. His tone was decisive, sharp. "You're involved in this too. After all, weren't you part of the deception as well?" Peter stiffened at the confrontation, an unexpected challenge from someone he thought was merely a victim. Yet, John was more astute than Peter realized. It wasn't solely about revealing the deceit. There was a larger plot unfolding, something Sarah hadn't yet uncovered, and that moment called for disclosure. John approached the table, meeting Sarah's gaze squarely. John shifted his gaze to Peter, scrutinizing him intensely. It seemed as if he was scrutinizing every response from the man in front of him. "Do you believe you truly know the person beside you, Sarah?" John asked softly, but with purpose. Confused, Sarah wiped away her tears and questioned him. "What are you implying?" She looked to Peter for clarification, yet found none. "This individual, Peter, your supposed future," John explained. "He's not as he appears. He has deceived you, Sarah, just as you have deceived me. And ironically, he too was about to leave you." "That's preposterous," Peter defended himself, attempting to maintain control of the situation. "I don't require your explanations." "You will want to hear them," John responded calmly, but with an air of certainty. "Because I know the truth about you, Peter." Baffled, Sarah stared back and forth between them, unable to grasp what was transpiring. Sarah could see discomfort on Peter's face. He shifted in his seat, as if eager to depart immediately, yet aware that he couldn't just walk away. "Ever pondered how this man managed to show up so conveniently in your life? How he always provided the right answer for what you wanted to hear?" John leaned against the table. "Because, Sarah, he's a con artist, a deceiver, a parasite who exploited you to obtain what he truly desired: your money." John's words sliced through the air like a knife. Sarah gaped, struggling to comprehend his statement. She looked at Peter, expecting him to refute it, to say something that would make it seem false. But Peter remained mute, his expression guarded. "What?" Sarah spluttered, looking at Peter, now understanding what was unfolding. This can't be real." Peter attempted to gather himself, but the truth had already surfaced. There was no more hiding who he truly was. "I unveiled your actions, Peter. I unearthed your real persona, the deceitful acts you orchestrated against women, The fraudulent ventures you entangled Sarah in. Did you believe you could escape unscathed? John was resolute, his voice echoing the triumph of exposing the truth. Sarah, stunned, let go of the envelope and slumped back in her chair, as if she'd been struck. Her eyes brimmed with tears once more, but this time they were different. Now, she wept not out of remorse, but because she understood she had been deceived twice over. I, I believed in you, she murmured, staring at Peter, her voice faltering. Peter eventually broke the silence, his countenance now stern. Sarah, he started, but she halted him with a sharp gesture. No, he exploded, his voice filled with fury and anguish. You manipulated me. John observed the spectacle with a blend of triumph and sorrow. This moment he'd anticipated, but witnessing Sarah's distress due to her own decisions didn't provide him the satisfaction he expected. Peter, acknowledging his lack of control over the scenario, swiftly stood from the table. He understood there was no more to be done. His secret had been exposed, and he gained nothing further here. It's finished, John stated coolly as Peter departed the restaurant without a glance back. Sarah remained solitary, her hands trembling, eyes red from weeping, lost in thought. The ambience in the restaurant shifted drastically after Peter's exit, his path of deceit and treachery evident in every hurried stride towards the door. The din of clinking cutlery and hushed conversations around them seemed muted to John and Sarah, who stayed put, engulfed in the emotional upheaval that had just erupted. Sarah was bewildered, tears drying on her cheeks as she struggled to comprehend what had transpired. Across the table, John held his ground, yet inside him swirled a tempest of mixed emotions. The triumph he anticipated was not to be found in this moment, at least not in the way he had envisioned it. He believed that unmasking Peter and Sarah's betrayal would bring him relief, liberation. But as he gazed into the shattered visage of the woman with whom he had spent so many years, he understood that the reality was more intricate and agonizing than he could have foreseen. The figure before him was not merely a traitor, but a woman who had been twice deceived, who had lost her trust, her love, and now her optimism. Sarah's breaths came in gasps. Her eyes, once filled with light, now seemed distant, as if she were submerged in her own guilt and disgrace. An extended quiet descended between them, a dense silence neither knew how to pierce. Sarah attempted to speak, but my voice faltered, trapped within a maelstrom of emotions. How could I be so foolish? John remained silent for a while. John too pondered over the same question, not from a place of derision or arrogance, but due to a deeper unease. How had they arrived at this juncture? He wasn't merely a victim of betrayal, but an uninvolved observer of a relationship decaying bit by bit, all while standing aloof and doing nothing about it. You're adrift, Sarah, John eventually admitted, his voice soft yet resolute. I am too. This sudden admission struck her in a way that no accusation or confrontation had before. What? He questioned, almost disbelieving what he was saying. For years, I've been distancing myself, he went on, the words straining to leave his mouth, yet sincere. Entranced by maintaining an image, by ensuring our lives were ideal, I failed to perceive when you began drifting away. I chose to disregard the signs because deep within, I didn't wish to acknowledge the problem. Sarah nodded reluctantly as tears spilled forth despite her efforts. She realized she had erred grievously, but John's acknowledgement of his own faults caused her perspective to shift. It wasn't merely about deceit. It was the collapse of a partnership that couldn't adapt to alterations, that refused to evolve when necessary. Yet, John continued sternly, your actions are still inexcusable. He was present, and you chose to deceive me. A pause fell over them again, Sarah unable to meet John's gaze. She knew he spoke the truth. The gap between her errors and the betrayal she inflicted was vast. Now, all that remained was the vacuum of his decisions. You can alter the course, John said eventually, gathering his thoughts. He drew a deep breath before speaking. I'm not saying we can revert to our past. That time has passed. Instead, there might be a chance for something new. At least be truthful with yourself. Try to repair what can be mended. You have something left, she saw him puzzled. Repair what? He asked, looking intently into her eyes. I have nothing remaining, but you do, John responded. Our children, they continue to depend on you. I'm unsure about our future together, but they should not suffer due to our errors. Sarah's thoughts were shattered by the mention of their children. The hurt of betrayal was combined with remorse for the potential damage his actions might inflict upon them. All along, she had been so engrossed in her longing for change, for an escape, that she hadn't considered the broader repercussions of her decisions. How would this impact those she cherished most? John observed the impact of his words on her. He knew the pain she felt was genuine, but she needed to confront reality, just as he had done. She needed to acknowledge the destruction and find a way to reconstruct, even if it was only for herself and their children. What's your plan next? She softly inquired. I'm unsure myself, John confessed. However, what I do require is space to reflect, to comprehend all that transpired. His gaze fell upon Sarah, a blend of pity and empathy echoing within him. She was shattered, yet so was he. I'm undecided as of now, he continued. But I need time. We both do. With a slow nod, she acknowledged the truth wounds inflicted in the dark take time to mend, if they ever heal fully. Both understood the ethical quandary. Sarah, shattered by the scam, had to determine her path towards life reconstruction from the embers of her decisions. She was a victim, yes, but also an architect of her own downfall. How would she find forgiveness for herself? How would she progress, acknowledging that her self-centered pursuit led to the collapse of everything she once knew? For John, the choice wasn't less complex. Despite his desire to separate from Sarah, he recognized an indestructible connection, forged by their shared children. He wasn't ready to vanish or let animosity govern his choices. The stakes were higher than bruised ego or a fractured union. John slowly stood, donned his coat as Sarah watched silently, her face etched with muted despair. I'll look after the kids this week, he stated quietly. You have all the time needed to reflect, to collect your thoughts. Sarah nodded, speechless. She understood his intent was just, but she also realized the path ahead would be difficult. There were no guarantees of reconciliation, no certainty they could mend what they had shattered. The air hung heavy with the burden of that evening's words and actions. John approached the door, feeling the weight of the situation. He didn't glance behind. There was an air about him that signaled the conclusion of a segment of his life he had never envisioned losing. Contrastingly, Sarah remained seated for some minutes following John's departure. Her world, indelibly shattered, would never be the same. She had lost her husband, her lover, and perhaps a piece of herself. All that lay ahead was an uncharted path, where she must find a means to cope with the consequences of her decisions. As the restaurant's lights gradually faded, a fresh quietness descended. The uncertain future loomed over them both, casting a prolonged, chilly shadow. In the days following the fateful dinner, Sarah was enveloped in a profound silence, secluding herself from the world outside. True to his word, John had departed with the children, and now, solitary, she confronted the reverberation of her actions. The days stretched interminably, the nights seemed eternal. Sally wandered through the vacant home, surveying the remnants of a union that crumbled into rubble. Framed images adorning the walls mocked her, concealing beneath their vibrant appearances the gradual, silent decay of their bond. Gaze falling on the mirror, she saw a woman shattered by more than just Peter's infidelity, also by what she had unwittingly contributed. He had betrayed the companion he once shared years with, and was now bearing the consequences. Regret gnawed at her, yet the specter of unfulfilled hopes lingered most profoundly, a void that, even if different choices had been made, would persist. Perhaps it was an emptiness no one could ever fill. Meanwhile, Jack grappled with his inner struggles. The company of their children provided solace, but the burden of failure continued to torment him. The divorce proceedings were underway, and although legal matters loomed large, his deepest concern revolved around the consequences for his children. He observed them playing, their laughter genuine and unassuming, oblivious that their lives were on the verge of irrevocable transformation. John understood he had to be resilient for them, yet a profound sorrow he tried to suppress lingered, an affliction only time could alleviate. Sarah made numerous attempts to converse with John, yearning to express remorse for her actions, but she was aware that no words could rectify the past. Their interactions were terse, utilitarian, consistently revolving around their offspring. The gap between them appeared to expand with every phone call, every message exchanged. It seemed as though, after years of intimacy, they were now virtual strangers. It was on a frosty afternoon, several weeks into the divorce proceedings, that Sarah mustered the courage to depart from home and confront reality. She attended school to collect her children, certain John would be present. Upon seeing him standing by the car, something within her shattered anew. There was no fury in his gaze, only a weary melancholy. Greeting each other with a nod, they appeared more as parents than spouses for a brief moment, connected solely by their shared affection for their children. Their kids raced towards the car, their laughter echoing carefree and wordless. Sarah struggled to swallow, recognizing that she couldn't undo the past. The youngsters were becoming aware of changes, and their growing understanding was an agonizing truth. John, however, remained determined to progress. He acknowledged the wound inflicted by betrayal wouldn't heal swiftly, but the harsh knowledge that both his wife and deceiver had betrayed him left him cold and hardened him permanently. He vowed never again to be vulnerable to such pain. Peter's heart, previously open and kind-hearted, had gradually hardened behind a fortress of mistrust, making it challenging to penetrate. Sarah, following weeks in solitude, realized she required assistance. She opted for therapy not merely to navigate the divorce, but also to decipher where she had strayed. She understood that the issue transcended betrayal. It was a more profound dissatisfaction with herself, which led her to make harmful choices. Her road to recovery would be prolonged, and she was prepared to tread it, even though she knew the route would be isolating. In Peter's case, his life followed a predetermined course. After being exposed, as anticipated, he fled. The scheme he concocted against Sarah didn't bring him the expected results, but that didn't deter him from attempting it on another victim. He persisted in living a life of duplicity, always scouting for a fresh target, someone weak enough to be ensnared in his web of deceit. His fate, however, was already sealed. Eventually, his actions led to their inevitable reckoning. John and Sarah diverged, yet remained tethered by the offspring who forged their bond. As years rolled by, the sting of deception morphed into resigned acknowledgement. Sarah embarked on constructing her life anew, while John retreated further, fixated on his profession and family. The affection they once cherished faded, though the echoes of their shared past lingered profoundly. Sarah gazed toward the future warily, mindful that her decisions had reshaped her destiny dramatically. She was no longer the woman yearning for a flawless existence with an adoring partner. Instead, she confronted the necessity to acknowledge her true self and discover means to coexist with it. John, though reluctant to confess, harbored nostalgia for the uncomplicated past, recalling the instances when he held faith that love could surmount all obstacles. Now, however, he comprehended that certain scars defy healing by mere passage of time. This narrative explores deception, yet delves into the repercussions of our decisions and the intricacies of human feelings. Infidelity transcends breaching trust. It shatters oneself, frequently leaving wounds that cannot be mended. If you were moved by this tale, express your thoughts below and share your insights. We are eager to learn about your emotions during this odyssey of errors, remorse, and fresh starts. And remember to subscribe to our channel for more narratives with similar themes. Note that we do not condone any form of betrayal. All stories serve as cautionary tales on how such actions can wreck lives. Until our next encounter.